meeting to order, and the first item is the announcement of the hearing procedure. Thank you for your attendance and participation. The purpose of the public hearing is to gather information from the public to help the commission formulate recommendations. In order to ensure a fair and orderly meeting where everyone can participate, the commission requests that you act respectfully to everyone in attendance and follow the public hearing procedures. The chairperson will call the public hearing item. The planning department will present the staff recommendation. Commissioners may ask questions of staff. Presentation by the applicant or representatives. Commissioners may ask questions of the applicant. The chairperson will open the public hearing and will call for public comments from persons in support of the items, followed by persons in opposition. The applicant will have a chance for rebuttal comments. The chairperson will close the public hearing, and commissioners may ask questions and have discussion, and then we'll take action. Speakers must speak from the podium and state their name and address for the record. The chairperson reserves the right to establish a time limit for all speakers to ensure that everyone can speak. I don't think we need a time limit this evening. The designation of a spokesperson for groups sharing a common point of view is encouraged. All comments and questions will be directed to the chair from the podium and not to the applicant, staff, or audience. When the hearing is closed, additional public comments are not permitted. Roll call. We'll have roll call.
Rosa Cavazos, Terry Robinson,
Here.
Jeanette Johnson,
Here.
Chad Gearhart,
Here.
Dan Bryan,
Here.
Myron Langwetter. With 4 members present, there is a quorum.
Thank you. Have there been communications from the public to the staff?
No.
Any ex parte communications by members of the commission?
No.
Any conflict of interest?
No.
All right, then we will call Z25-01, Rodney J. Roberson Trust, requesting to amend the district zoning classification from RA1, Rural Agricultural District, to I1, Light Industrial District, on the property located approximately 125 feet east of the intersection of East Lakeland Drive on the south side of Northwest US 24 Highway in Silver Lake Township.
All right, thank you, Hareen Perez, Planning and Zoning Administrator. We have only one case today, which is Z2501 Rodney Robinson Trust. The requested action is to amend the district zoning classification from RA1 to I1. It's located northwest of US 24 Highway in Silver Lake Township, and it's about 1.85 acres. Here we have the general location, and you can see that in the blue star. And here we have the vicinity map. And the property owners within 1,000 feet. We sent out 13 letters, however, we received no responses. Staff recommends approval subject to the following conditions. 1, submission of a Category A drainage report to Public Works for review and approval. Any requirements of the drainage report must be met prior to development. 2, a final plat of the subject property shall be approved and recorded prior to development. 3, an entrance permit from KDOT must be obtained, or if not available, an ingress-egress easement with the parcel to the west will be considered upon consideration of the building permits. And that concludes this item.
All right. Are there a representative here, someone that wants to speak for the zoning request?
Joshua Belinsky with SBB Engineering. It's a pretty simple case. Mr. Robertson owns the property to the west, and his window and door company and he's just wanting to develop this 1.85 acres to provide additional manufacturing and storage space, and possibly in the future, some storage units, possibly just keeping his options open. Those three requirements, we're preparing the stormwater report now with the plat submittal. We're applying for the entrance permit as we speak, so we'll have all that documentation done fairly quickly. Other than that, not much more to be said.
All right. Any questions that any of you would like to ask? I guess not. Thank you very much. And is there anyone from the public that would like to speak? I'm assuming you're all together. Then I guess we'll close the public part of the hearing. And do the commissioners have any questions or any discussion?
Storage units are allowed as a use under I-1, right? No, nothing else?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and on this one, they're doing, this one is the rezoning from RA to I-1, but they also are in the process of working on a plat, which you'll hear once we have that on the schedule. And so they will be back again, but yeah, with the rezoning, all of the uses that they've proposed, all they would have to do at that point would come in for building permits. They're all allowed.
The only question I would have is it look pretty good to being able to get an entrance permit?
Yes, we had the KDOT representative out, and we marked the location of the entrance, and he approved the site distances and things like that, and told us to go ahead with submitting the permit app.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Is there a motion?
Okay. I'll move to accept the staff recommendation to approve the rezoning from RA
Okay,
to industrial.
so approval according to what
Those,
we see on the screen.
yes, those three pending conditions.
I second that.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded to approve the zoning change, subject to the recommendations of staff.
Chad Gerhardt,
Aye.
Myron Linewetter, Terry Robinson,
Aye.
Dan Bryan,
Aye.
Rosa Cavazos, Jeanette Johnson.
Aye.
With a unanimous vote in favor, the item is recommended for approval and will go to the Board of County Commissioners on June 9th to be heard by them.
Very good.
Remember that those meetings have been moved to Mondays, so June 9 is Monday now. Yeah.
All right, we thank you, and we're going to move on now to some planning-related issues. You're welcome to stay if you'd like to hear us discuss the solar energy conversion systems. Not, you're free to leave.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so item H is discussion of planning related items, and what we have on there is the work session for solar energy conversion systems. After our discussions last month, what I did was I went ahead and put together the starts of a draft for solar regulations. I was working on them up until just right before, otherwise I would have sent them to you guys to look at ahead of time. But ultimately, what we have here are several specific requirements for the applications, but then I also did a section that's just termed recommendations. In our discussion last month, part of the question was, do we have to lay everything out in the regulations that they have to do? Or is it possible that we have some regulations that they have to follow, and then we have a list of other items that could be considered that may or may not apply to each specific case, so that we're not over-regulating every single conditional use permit, but at the other side of that, you have some direction of things to consider as you're looking through these cases whenever they may come up. So that's how I did it. I looked through Sedgwick County's solar regulations. I know that Terry, you had been looking at those, and there were a lot of great details in there. So I took some of the information from theirs. I also took some from Harvey County. And then now that I have this set, I think that what I'll do is I'll go back even to some of the other counties and see where they may have put items, and if there are things that are in others that are missing in either Sedgwick County or Harvey County, we could always add those in. So ultimately, the first thing that I put was that personal solar, or SECS, SECS, solar energy conversion systems are gonna be allowed in any zone. So that would be if you have them on your house, your business, anything that's supporting your own personal use, those are allowed in any zone. And you do not have to get a conditional use permit, that would just be upon a building permit. Then I also put that all others would be allowed upon the approval of a conditional use permit only within zones RA, RR, as well as then I1 and I2. None of them will be allowed within a special flood hazard area. That would include all mapped floodplain, floodway, or other special hazard flood zones. I did inquire with one of the engineers with the Division of Water Resources. She was doing a floodplain presentation at our planning meeting a few weeks ago. We do an annual statewide planning meeting with other county officials. And I asked her what her input or the state's input on solar within the floodplain, and she said that they had no specific input, but her personal recommendation is that we keep it away for a multitude of reasons. If we did allow it within a floodplain, obviously then they would all have to go through various floodplain development permits and potentially hiring engineers, and depending on what it is that they're putting in, they may have to get elevation certificates or no-rise certificates or whatever's required. So it's just easier if we kind of keep it away from those floodplain areas. After our discussion the last time, I indicated that the project area shall not exceed 240 acres. We stated that as kind of an across the board, but one thing that I thought about after the fact is that if you wanted to allow, we were looking at those areas that were kind of further away and thinking, well, 240 acres may not be so bad. But, another thing that we could do is have in the RA zone, which is the rural agricultural, which is further away, allow for up to 240 acres. And then if you wanted to minimize that a little bit in the RR, which is closer to town, to the city, we could always do that. But I put it in here as 240 acres. And then I indicated that a project area boundary, so that would be the outskirts of any boundary of that project, should not be nearer than 2 miles to any other project area boundary. So that would allow us to then say, we'll allow those 240 acres, but you can't be any closer than 2 miles to another project, and that will help space them apart. And that would be measured between a boundary line to the other boundary line, utilizing a straight line as the crow flies from one to the other. I indicated some setbacks from residences of 500 feet, from any other buildings or accessory structures located on another property that's not a party to the project boundary, would be a setback of 150 feet. From property lines, a minimum of 50 feet, but those others would push that back if there are residences or structures that make it go back further. And then also 150 feet from any road or unimproved road right-of-way. Now, I included unimproved road right-of-way because we do have dedicated road right-of-ways throughout Shawnee County that have not yet been built out, but if it were to be built out in 20 years and there's a solar farm sitting there, you want to make sure that it's set back just as appropriate from any already built road. And then one thing that we had included in our 2 previously approved solar farms is that they would provide a review after the first year of operation. I don't recall whether they then had to submit an annual or, every 2 or every 5-year review, but I think that we would want them to have a review after the first year and then maybe also include every 5 years thereafter, so that they can check in with us and update us on what's happening, how production has been, making sure that they're still operating and that we don't need to try and move forward with any sort of decommissioning.
Does the county trigger those type of reviews, or does the,
In here, I put that it's the responsibility of the applicant. They should be the ones responsible, and I will be honest that we did get one just recently from the 2 solar farms. Now that, it was late, and we didn't have it on any sort of calendar system notifying us so that we could send out a reminder. I did talk, we're in the middle of doing a building permit portal, and I have been talking with them a little bit about whether there's any sort of reminder system that we can utilize, and there's just probably not. The problem with this is that as employees and staff changes, there are some of us that don't know that there are projects that have historically been told that they need to file these reports, and if nobody knows and they don't do it, then what's gonna happen? So we have to have some sort of system to alert us if the applicant fails to get it accomplished.
is that a revocable, could you revoke their CUP if they don't?
You could, if you felt, I would say that, yes, you could, because it's a condition of the CUP. I think that there would be some flexibility in the sense that if we send out a reminder and say, hey, you haven't done it, and they get it done, then it's fine. Yeah. So then
Just real quick on that,
Yeah.
on that number 10, not that I wanna get into crazy details, but I could see that being a problem in the future, gray area. The first year of operation, is that when we first approve it, when they first
No.
break ground, when they first turn
Once-
it on?
Once they commence actual operations. So it takes a lot of time, even from the point that they get the conditional use permit
Mhm.
approved. Once they come to us for the building permits and get everything finalized and then actually flip on the
Yeah,
lights.
flip the switch, okay.
Yep.
So once they start actually running as a business?
Yep.
Okay.
So then number 11, I talk about all project applications. Now, some of this is not gonna be much different than any other conditional use permit. You have to include the site plan, you need to include a business plan or project narrative, but I wanna make sure that they're including anything about the total acreage of the project, number of arrays, how it's gonna be, phases of construction. They should also provide a detailed narrative on the actual technology that's gonna be used, height, mounting, so the actual solar panels and arrays. They would need to do a drainage report, and some of this came from our prior approved conditional use permits, or what we required of them. Soil erosion plans, vegetative and landscaping plan, glare prevention. One thing that we did not have the 2 solar farms do is include a decommissioning and reclamation plan or a financial assurance. Now recall that on there, they are to be held to the same standard as any new regulations, and so we could go back on them and say, you need to provide us these plans for review and approval to make it part of your approved plan. So a bond and then a decommissioning or reclamation plan. So then the rest of them, and those are the ones that I required. The rest of them are recommended, and once someone has applied, we would recommend that they provide us as much of it as possible. But also, once they appear in front of you, if you found that there are things that they didn't include that you would want, you could go back and say, well, here's a list of all these recommendations, and I think we need you to do these items. My office could also do the same based on the circumstances. If we felt like there was a specific environmental concern, we could ask them to provide those details. But it includes pilot agreements, traffic impact analysis, construction management plans, a plan for removal of damaged panels and components, information regarding lighting, or if it's close to an airport, needing an FAA sign-off, environmental assessments, soil and groundwater testing, emergency sign, contact information for signs, if there's a fire plan, utilizing existing terrain and vegetation, and I noted in here, because Terry had mentioned this, to the greatest extent possible, that they should retain existing native vegetation, trees and tree lines, so trying to utilize trees versus taking them down. And then if they sell or transfer the lease, then they would have to notify us in writing so that we could ensure that the new applicant has to comply. I have on here N and N for battery storage systems as well as the electrical distribution and transmission lines, but I don't really have, I don't know what to put in there yet, and so that's one where I would like to put some additional detail before we vote on it. And so hopefully before next meeting, I can put some more details on that. Within 72 hours of an extraordinary event, they would have to provide us notice. So what if there's a big hailstorm and all of a sudden a bunch of panels are destroyed or have been damaged? And then that may be an event that triggers soil or ground testing. And then I also indicated that all other regulations that are currently underneath our conditional use permits would still have to be applied. And that's where I left it. Do you guys have specific questions or direction you want me to go? I want you to look through these, study them, compare them to regulations that are currently out there, think about it, and then we can have a more in-depth study next month. But I wanted to give you guys some direction on where I thought it was going.
I think the biggest question that I have is what actions will the county or can the county take, especially since there could be some environmental issues here, if whoever puts this in does not comply? In other words, they get it in, but they're not maintaining the property, we got soil erosion, we've got damaged panels, or we get to the end and they don't follow the reclamation plan. What avenues does the county have in those scenarios, and does that need to be put in our literature?
I think part of that's already in there with,
The bond.
because, the bonding.
The financial assurance.
So you're gonna rely on the bond, you'll just collect the
Well,
bond.
so we have the ability to enforce in terms of sending violation notices, which we would do with any situation. We can send violation notices if they don't respond or don't comply with what it is that they're supposed to do. Then I do have the ability to send that on to the county counselor's office, who then has the ability to file court cases or get injunctions against them to force them to do something. Some of that will fall back on the bond or the financial surety, where the governing body, if I went to them and I said, they're not doing what it is that they're supposed to do, we need to call it back, then they would be able to direct that bond would get released so that we could mitigate damages. Some of it may be going to court though.
Yeah, so how are we going to determine the amount of the bond?
They will be responsible for telling us the total cost of, and some of it is laid out in here, and some of it I was still reading through what other counties have done. But it'll be similar to what we would require on other items where we require a bond, like quarries. They would have to provide us the detail of what the cost would be to clean it up were there to be a major event, or they have to do the reclamation. So what is it that their cost estimate is that it would cost? And then I would want them to, obviously they would give that to us, we would review it and determine if we need to upcharge them or make them do an overage percentage. Then they would need to do a review every 5 years and look at cost of inflation, see if we need to up that. If so, then they would have to increase that bond or cash escrow surety.
Okay, thank you.
Some of it we would also probably need to rely on our own, people who know a little bit about it. We might reach out to our financial administrator, we might reach out to our county counselor who has a lot of experience in terms of bonds and costs of those. Someone on our own planning commission. I don't know, Chad, do you work at all with the bonds?
There's been a couple counties that have required us to get,
Or a professional
yeah, like
study,
Right, or basically a couple competitive bids.
okay?
As to what it would cost to put, do the reclamation of the quarry site. I actually think though, on a rock quarry, I feel like there's something statutorily,
I think there's statutes, yeah, for,
that sets the bond. That we just increased, actually.
Do you have to put the full amount in the bond, or is it a percent?
That I don't know.
so the way that I don't know about with quarries, I think you can usually do either way. It's sort of like if you're bonding out of jail, you can pay your
Yeah.
cash bond and just
Yeah.
pay the money, or you can hire a surety company to do it and you pay a
Right.
percentage.
Yeah. Yeah, we pay, right, like a highway job, we pay the surety, and then if something goes south, they collect on the surety. Obviously, these have to go to the county commissioners, and they have to choose to approve these as well, but it feels like one of those sets of regs you had up there last week had a couple of caveats on some of them that like said, unless, like they could derive from it if the Board of County Commissioners chose to. Like, for instance, number 4, if we vote on this and then the county commissioners vote on this, that it is limited to 240 acres, that's set. And then, we get, I don't know, something changes, there's a different set of county commissioners,
Mm-hmm,
and they want, they feel like it should be, there's a suitable piece of land that's 640 acres. It would have to circle all the way back through us and then back through the VOCC to change that.
correct.
Unless we put behind that, unless approved by the Board of County Commissioners.
And that's what Douglas County has.
Yeah.
So they have theirs limited to like 1,000 or 1,200 to some degree, whatever the number is. They have a set number, and then it says unless an exception is provided by the BCC. And the current system that they have under consideration, the total project boundary is larger. The actual arrays are only like 600 acres of that, but the total project area is much larger. And so, yes, they have a clause like that.
Speaking for myself, I like that.
For more or less, or either way.
Either way, I just like to give some flexibility to a Board of County Commissioners on the size of the thing.
I have a couple of questions too. I don't think the distance from the city limits or the metropolitan growth area was addressed in this.
It wasn't.
And so that's something that we need to think about. And then, it's easy to approve it when they're using existing transmission lines. But if they have to put up transmission lines and go along a lot of other property owners' property, then that's a different story. And
So
that's
on
something we
here-
probably ought to
Right.
address too.
On page 3, I did not number these pages, nor did I date this draft, so just beware that once you leave here, you'll never know when I presented it to you. On page 3, I do have a sentence about electrical interconnections, distribution lines, and transmission lines, but that is one that I did not delve deep enough into to properly write anything about. A lot of the other counties discussed having underground lines, requiring specific underground lines or following. So I can look at that a little bit closer. Another thing that I didn't address in here is this makes the assumption that 240 acres is all right next to each other. And in some cases, you may have a project boundary line but the actual project area is divided up. And so then how do we address it being skipping and jumping and maybe not all contiguous? And so that's another thing that I did not address. In regards to the city limits and the urban growth area, I think that I would be hesitant to limit that without first getting input from the city planning department to whether they care. You know, there's a lot of people, some of the other counties specifically limit it from the distance of the city limits, but when you have projects within the city limits, do we care if they're close to the city limits? Now we did discuss at the prior meeting whether putting one near a set of city limits may prohibit specific growth, but I think that what we would wanna do is once, you know, if that is something that you wanna add in, I would wanna bounce that off of the city to see if they care or not. And if they don't, then we may not include it as a topic.
Yeah, I think Sedgwick County banned it from the urban growth area in theirs, didn't they?
I do believe they did have some sets of specific areas that were not to be touched.
And I remember that because they were looking at a situation where somebody wanted to put a solar field within that urban growth area, and they were trying to avoid that at all costs for the various reason of expansion.
Yeah.
What about the smaller towns? So Topeka has its urban growth area, but the smaller towns, I mean, if we're only 500 feet away from a residence, I mean, they could butt one of these things right up against Silver Lake or Rossville or wherever.
I mean, technically, when we do these, I think that it's a good idea to send them to each of the towns as well as the townships and allow them to review and give input. Because it will affect each of them.
So typically somebody gonna make an investment like this, would they typically come before a planning board before they'd even purchase the property?
No.
Okay.
They probably lease it, not purchase it.
Okay.
Most of them will lease it, but no. I mean, just like when we were hearing about leases out there on wind, they were in existence for years before we found out that they had leases on property. I mean, I can assume,
We lease property for rock quarries
Yeah.
before we ever go to the planning board.
Okay.
yeah,
Good to
I
know.
can only assume that there's entirely possible leases out there right now we just don't know about. Yeah.
I mean, just like, they would just write the lease that it's, they can cancel them at any time,
Yeah.
basically. They're pretty one-sided.
Yeah, the transmission line thing that's a good thing to bring up. As a builder, developer, I get phone calls all the time from houses that I built in areas where Evergy's gonna build transmission lines with them thinking that I can somehow fix it. And I'm like, no, I can come testify on your behalf, but that's about it. So I know transmission lines are big deals, I mean, to most folks.
Okay, anything else?
You've given us a lot of food for
Yeah.
thought here and some direction. I certainly appreciate that.
Absolutely, if you are reviewing it in your free time and wanna send emails of other comments, if you do, send them to me, directly, don't send them to the whole group. But you're absolutely free to send those over and we can always implement or include them as suggested changes in the next round. Like I said, I hope to bolster this just a tad bit more, and I will email this out to the other commissioners that were not able to be here tonight so that they can see it as well and give input. And then I would like to have a good serious discussion about it in June. Not saying that you need to vote on it in June, but getting it to a point where we think that we're moving towards having some public comment, public hearing type things. Also, just as a side note, we will put on the agenda the extension of the moratorium at the the next meeting. So June 9 is our next meeting, and it will have the extension of the moratorium on there. The moratorium went into effect on June 24 of last year, so what I'll do is I'll have it on that June meeting, and once you've voted whether to extend it or to not extend it, then I would take that to the Board of County Commissioners at their following BCC meeting, so that that is done prior to the expiration.
What's the order of operations going forward in terms of, so we have this, I mean, a pretty rough, nice template here with a bunch of stuff, then we're gonna keep cleaning and recycling. When does, we don't adopt anything until we hear public comment? Or do we adopt
No.
and then you let the comment public?
Nope, so what the standard is that we get it to a point that we like, and you guys have said, okay, here's where we think we're at. So you'll do some mini votes, you'll continue to give me discussions and updates, and I'll make changes and moves. And then we will, at that point, accept it as its kind of final version, and then we'll send it out to review, cities, townships, fire districts, other county departments who may have input, and get input from them. And then we'll set it for a public hearing here in front of you guys, just like we would a rezoning or conditional use permit. So we'll publish notice in the paper, we will send out notice to everybody who's ever requested information about it. And then we will do it, probably not here, we might do it at Great Overland Station or elsewhere, have a major public hearing on it and let people have public comment. And then you would vote to recommend approval or denial at that point, in official status, which would then butt it over to the Board of County Commissioners.
And if we would vote to deny, then we could still come back in, workshop it,
Mhm.
like, because I'm sure we're gonna hear some things from people that know
Yeah.
more than we do.
Yeah.
That you might wanna address.
I would expect public comment to be rather lengthy.
Mm-hmm.
If it's like the last time we did it, it will be rather lengthy.
It will be
You're
lengthy.
gonna need that gavel.
Of course, we had wind on that.
Yeah,
one.
we had wind.
on that one
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. Well, I'm just sure there's gonna be a bevy of questions. We better be ready to answer.
Yeah.
Did I miss it, or are we going to say that the array has to be limited to a certain percentage of?
I did
the
not
whole
include
property?
that. I did mention that as an option to a percentage within that 240, but I didn't because I had all of the setbacks and I limited the total project to the 240 acres. And so it already to a degree
It's already limited.
limits. And so I didn't know if we really if you still would like one, I would absolutely put one in, that's fine. But I didn't because I had some significant setbacks from various things, so.
And I think the setbacks do the job, and you gotta give them some
Yeah.
freedom to use the land.
Yeah.
I mean, not every piece of land is gonna be just a big flat open field, so they might need to
Yes.
adjust as they go.
Like she said, have some over here and some over
Mhm.
here and
Yep.
some over here.
Yep. Okay, well, other than that, I don't have anything else on this. We will talk about it more next month.
Do we have anything else on the agenda?
Not tonight, or you mean next month?
Yeah.
Next month.
We have the rezoning for, from O&I,
I'm sorry, yes, the rezoning.
and then is the plat for windows and design
It's
on
gonna
here?
be in July.
Okay, so we just have, it's a rezoning of, it's a commercial construction office, that is purchasing a piece of property practically out of the county. It's over off of, 24 highway, right?
24.
Highway 24, and practically to Carlson, well, right off of Carlson Road.
Oh, wow.
And so they were originally wanting to rezone it to C1, but we've modified that and downgraded it to just an O&I rezoning, which is office and institutional, so it can never be used for anything other than an office. Part of the concern that came by, since it is quasi-spot zoning, putting commercial way out there, was that once you rezone it to C1, a lot of different stuff could go on that property. But by changing that to O&I, it limits it pretty significantly.
So is that one that you think probably won't have a lot of commission too. So it shouldn't
Uh-huh.
take very long.
I don't think so.
Okay, that way we can devote more
Yeah.
time to this.
Yeah, take notes, read up. Like I said, send me comments or questions ahead of time so I can be prepared to answer specific questions if you have them, or other recommendations that you think that I've really just missed out on. I tried to not over-regulate it, and I tried to put more of the, here's what we're requiring to be smaller, and here are other recommendations to be larger, to give us a little flexibility, so.
Okay, great.
Okay.
If there's no further business, then I guess we're adjourned.
I like the length of this meeting.
Better than some of the other ones.